There are a lot of games coming out in 2023, or an alternate version of that line, there are a lot of games that are ready to get delayed until 2024. But let's be positive for a second and pretend that all of these are actually coming out in the next 365 days. These are the top 50 games that I'm excited for in 2023. Yeah, top 50. This was supposed to be a top 10. I think I got a little bit carried away. I even cut a bunch of stuff from my own wishlist and games that are probably going to do really well, and I still couldn't drop it below the half-century mark, so I hope you're ready to hear about a lot of games really fast. Let's talk about what I think are going to be some of the biggest indie games of this year, and obviously we can't talk about this and not bring up Silksong. Hollow Knight is one of, if not the most important Metroidvania since Symphony of the Night. You don't need me to explain why the sequel is getting so much buzz. An interesting fact about Silksong actually is that Team Cherry decided early on to have exactly 34 bosses for the main character, Hornet, to fight. No more, no less. Don't believe me? Search Hollow Knight Hornet Rule 34 if you want some proof. Silksong has no exact release date, but all signs, including its presence in 2022's Xbox Showcase, which claimed to only show games releasing in the next calendar year, point to it coming out sometime in 2023. Another sequel to another well-loved Metroidvania coming out this year is Blasphemous 2. The first game had some rough edges, but they got smoothed out eventually, and it's a personal favorite of mine. At the very least, you can't deny its incredible art style and boss design. It's a lot like Death's Gambit, if Death's Gambit was good. Let's follow that up with two games that share Blasphemous's highly detailed pixel art aesthetic, The Last Faith and Replaced. The Last Faith feels like a very close relative to Blasphemous in style and gameplay, although it has a slightly larger dose of gothic horror. It received a pretty late delay in 2022, so chances are it launches early this year, which is great because no other games are coming out around then. I'm so happy with how the schedule is shaping out. And Replaced is a game that you've probably heard a lot about if you follow my channel. It explores a dense, retro-futuristic world, its lighting and animation is top tier, and a few shots from the newest trailer look like they were taken straight out of the Batman. I haven't been able to take my eyes off this game since it was first revealed. Let's take a break from Metroidvanias real quick. They've already taken up 3 of the first 4 slots and move on to a different genre. Fate games. Will Little Devil Inside ever come out? Is it even real? Will the New York Knicks ever win another title? These are all questions to which the answer is no, but on the off chance that Little Devil Inside does come out this year, considering last we heard of it, it was supposed to come out basically, now, I don't know, it could be pretty good. I'm kind of all hyped out on this game. It was my most anticipated indie from last year, and I slowly became more worried for it than anything, but if it can really pull things together, the sky's the limit for this one. Hades 2, another sequel, another guaranteed banger. Supergiant has not missed to this day. Hades is one of my favorite games of all time. Lock it in for Game of the Year contention when it drops in its full 1.0 state. They haven't confirmed if its early access will start in 2023, but it's looking really likely. They typically don't do long teases, and we know more information is coming soon, so we will likely see a version of Hades 2 in 2023. Hopoo Games just revealed their remake of the original Risk of Rain. I'm excited to play that one before they jump ship to a new IP since this one's now owned by Gearbox, and one of the few games in this slam dunk indie category that comes from a relatively unknown developer is The Plucky Squire. This seems like it could be another one of those Devolver Digital heavy hitters, sort of like this year's Cult of the Lamb. It plays around with perspective, doesn't seem content with just one style or one overarching gameplay loop, and it's shown off a cool Mad Lib puzzle system where you swap words of the story around to progress. It's all a fun little play on fairy tales done in a way that feels truly fresh and quintessentially video gamey. You may have forgotten, I kinda had, but Hyperlight Breaker is heading into early access this year, and it seems to be a good cross-section of Heart Machine's previous 2 games in Hyperlight Drifter and Solar Ash, both games that I enjoy very much. While we're still in the dark on a lot of details, the concept and good faith built up from their previous work is enough to have me pretty stoked. And alright, let's just toss in 3 more Metroidvanias at the end of this section here: Crowsworn, The Last Case of Benedict Fox, and Nine Souls. Crowsworn is the one that's most in danger of falling out of this year. It's tentatively set for December, but the team hit a lot of Kickstarter stretch goals, so that comes with a huge asterisk. Still, it's technically in the time frame, so it's still on this list. This game clearly owes a lot to Hollow Knight, but it comes through with a more robust combo-based fighting system that it compares to Devil May Cry. As a backer for this game, I got to play the exclusive demo, and let me tell you, even in this tiny vertical slice, the amount of moves that you could pull off was really impressive, especially knowing the coming features that weren't included here. The combat was slick and fancy, and the boss was really well designed. If this can actually be expanded outwards like promised, and like it looks like it might do, we got a classic on our hands, baby. Nine Souls also has a playable demo, one that's available to anyone, so you can just go download it right now, and this relies more on simple, parry-focused combat that still feels just as great. The artwork is crisp, the action is crunchy, and the demo really won me over. Everybody should go check it out. And finally, for this first section, The Last Case of Benedict Fox looks like the perfect game for me. It's dark and mysterious, seems like it's got some interesting story elements, a wide berth of abilities, large dense background, some grotesque Lovecraftian creatures. It sounds like Ori mixed with Psychonauts mixed with goddamn Clue. It really embraces the mystery side of the genre. I'm a little concerned about the potential floatiness of the combat, but we'll see if that's an issue once the game game actually comes out. It still looks great. Alright, let's move on to some of the AAA games, the big boys, and not just any of the big boys, the biggest boys, the 300 pounds, 4% body fat boys, the games that are going to truly define and shape the year, starting with Spider-Man 2. It's kind of crazy that we haven't got much of an update on this recently, but that also might be a good thing. A big problem with the first game and Miles Morales was oversharing in the trailers and coverage that did kind of ruin a lot of surprises. This one has a bit of an air of mystery that I hope it keeps to some degree. I'm so curious about how Venom and Kraven are going to drive the game's narrative, how the gameplay's evolved, how we're going to switch between Peter and Miles, and just how dark Insomniac gets with the story. For the first time since Resistance, they can tell a truly dark tale. Sony only has one PS Studios game for 2023 that we know of for sure, but if you're going to pick just one, Spider-Man is not a bad pick. Sticking with superheroes, kind of, Suicide Squad. I have a whole video on this if you want to hear all of the reasonings why I'm excited for it, but right now all I'll say is that this is Rocksteady's first game in 8 years, and it's simultaneously right up their alley and totally new for them. I honestly can't wait to see what they do with this concept. There's 2 remakes kicking off this year in RE4 and Dead Space, and while I think that we've maybe gone a bit overboard with the amount of additions that RE4 has now, this new one does look pretty promising. And the fact that it's getting a new and improved VR mode for PSVR 2 is pretty sweet as well. I'm even more excited for the Dead Space remake though, as somebody who didn't actually experience the original trilogy and has just sort of seen it out and about as part of video game lore. This remake looks amazing, apparently it's pretty faithful while still adding some significant upgrades, and it'll hopefully kick off the year pretty well after I guarantee Forspoken lays a hot turd. That demo sucked. Hogwarts Legacy doesn't come out much later, and I'm really hoping that it can nail the idea of a compact open world. Instead of just upping the mileage, I want to see Avalanche putting more secrets in every corner, packing every inch of this thing with activities, just making Hogwarts feel alive. Some of the longer gameplay segments that we've seen make the game feel occasionally empty, but in all fairness, these are scripted demo sequences, so it might not be too much cause for alarm. We'll see. The actual building of Hogwarts isn't the only explorable area, but it does seem like the main one, and I want to see this game show just how effective a small, dense world can be compared to something unnecessarily large. Xbox's double whammy of Starfield and Redfall feel like they have a lot riding on their shoulders after 2 years of a self-proclaimed dry spell, especially Starfield. Unfortunately, I've got a bit of a bad feeling about both, but that doesn't mean they don't have potential. Arcane has a history of great games, and even their most contentious one had great ideas that did strike a chord with some people. What they've shown of Redfall does look kind of generic, but fingers crossed it can be more than Vampire Left 4 Dead. Bethesda Game Studios' reputation is a bit more shaky nowadays, but I also feel like they know that, and they know that Starfield has to hit. The question is, will they do that by actually packing it with quality content, or just by bloating it to a ridiculous degree and leaning hard on bigger equals better? That still remains to be seen, but maybe, just maybe, they've finally gotten the memo. Stalker 2 is currently in turmoil because of the ongoing situation in Ukraine, and that's something that's obviously much bigger than video games, and I wish safety on everyone in that studio and in the country as a whole. The team at GSC Game World is somehow managing to continue work on this game despite everything. They're working inside of bomb shelters for God's sake, and they even dropped a new trailer recently reaffirming the 2023 release window. The game itself looks pretty damn good. The original Stalker was a cult hit, so I'm glad it's finally getting a long-awaited mainline sequel, and whenever it does come out, it can sort of plug up that hole in the realistic single-player FPS genre that's been pretty dry recently. Be patient with the devs, of course, but whenever this comes out, I hope it's a huge success. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is yet another one coming out early this year, and it looks like EA actually gave Respawn more time to work with this IP this time around instead of just rushing it out the door. The additions of dual wielding and fancier finishers and new upgrades and better customizables are all just bonuses to what was already a solid first game, and it's one of the easiest locks of next year. I really don't see a situation where this ends up bad as long as it doesn't massively fumble the story or runs into serious technical problems. Final Fantasy 16 will probably be the first Final Fantasy I get all the way through, and I'll probably do it with a big smile on my face. These trailers look awesome, the gameplay seems much more fluid than previous entries, and the director behind it is beloved. Tears of the Kingdom is another no-brainer. Nintendo could drop this and literally shut down its entire operation until 2024, and they'd still have one of their best years quality-wise since the Switch first dropped. I'm very curious to see a return to the old Assassin's Creed with Mirage, and I wonder if Ubisoft is going to breathe new life into it, or because that concept is pretty much lost on them, just kind of do exactly what they used to again with hardly any changes. But either way, I do think some of their plans for AC's future are promising. And if we're talking about AC, Armored Core 6 is going to show us whether FromSoft can make non-Souls games that are anywhere as good as their Souls games. Armored Core is kind of a weird franchise with a niche fan base, but From Software has evolved a lot recently, so who knows what it's turned into, and at this point, I'll basically buy whatever they're selling. If Miyazaki sold me crack, I'd start digging into it like a nice steak dinner. Oh, what's that? He's not directing it? The guy that made Sekiro is directing it? Yeah, this shit's gonna slap. Now, before I get to the next section, I wanted to mention that for anybody interested in VR, I don't have any VR games on here because it's still a little bit niche and I don't want to take up a whole section talking about it, but this will likely be a big year for that industry, and one of my longtime viewers has a nice little list of exciting VR games over on the channel Discord. If you haven't joined or if you're new here, go check it out in the description. We have a lot of discussions on there. It's a good time, and that additional list is a nice little bonus. Now I want to go back to indies and talk about some that have that Inscription or Neon White kind of energy. Stuff that looks really interesting and could even turn out to be some of the most quality releases of the year, but they haven't really hit the zeitgeist pre-release, the lesser known ones at the moment. Lost Soul Aside is a hack and slasher with a lot of DMC inspiration. This game started out as a passion project from a single developer and blossomed into something much bigger with a larger team. Parts of the gameplay that I've seen seemed a bit dragged out or mashy, but they've been improving on it for a while, and it's clearly got a great backbone for this kind of game, complete with anime action scenes that feel straight out of Metal Gear Rising. I would love for this to be one of those big indie success stories that we're always hearing about, the something incredible out of nothing of the world. If it can put together a well-paced campaign, that goal is in play. Speaking of one-person teams, a couple of weeks ago I talked about Skate Story, which has some of my favorite art direction I've seen in like anything. The colors are so powerful, the surface is so reflective and textured, the environment's so weird and haunting, and it's got a dancing penguin. We got a really early look at its interesting control layout, but it hasn't given us a lot of detail on what the combat or even its structure will be, but just visually this game's had my money banked since it first popped up on my screen. 2023 might also be the year that we get the final act and the full 1.0 release of Ultra Kill. This is yet another solo project that's been making a lot of waves in the FPS genre. It is one of the most hectic and purely fun games I've ever played in its early access form. I can't wait until the full version is out there. In case it doesn't come out in full in 2023, the substitute here can be Reaver, which takes heavy inspiration from Ultra Kill and currently has a chunky demo on Steam. These are both wickedly fun and really take the training wheels off of first-person shooters. You can basically think of Meet Your Maker as what if Mario Maker, but Doom. This is an FPS with level building tools that seem pretty sophisticated. You can even set up enemy patrol paths, and while I'll admit that building isn't really my forte in games, it looks like it'll be a lot of fun to go through other fan-made levels, especially if they can do a good job bringing the best ones to the forefront. If Meet Your Maker is what if Super Mario Maker but Doom, Angerfoot is what if Hotline Miami but Feet. This is such a goofy project that put out a sizable demo last year. It's got that one-hit kill, bam bam bam, super-powered stanky toad gameplay. It's not gonna blow anyone's socks off with its thoughtful story or deep systems, but it'll blow your socks off so you can feed popcorn to your lady with your toes. If Angerfoot is what if Hotline Miami but Feet, Gumbrella is what if Gun but Umbrella. I think I need to find a new way to describe these games. Gumbrella is made by the creators of Gato Roboto, a game that was floor-to-ceiling quality in a teeny tiny little package, and it looks like it's keeping that emphasis on simplicity while going in a more steampunk direction. There's yet another demo for this on Steam, and it seems perfect for what it wants to be. There is a lot of Devolver representation on this list, but of course there is because Devolver almost exclusively publishes great games. Unbeatable is a game that I played the demo for in 2021. It's a very simple rhythm title that manages to stay engaging and has some bops on the demo soundtrack. There's a deeper story and world apparently coming in the full release, but I really just fell in love with this straightforward rhythm gameplay, and all I really need are a bunch more songs to jam out to. Bionic Bay is a great idea that will rely heavily on the ability of the level designers. This is a 2D puzzle platformer where you swap your position with objects in your surroundings. The trailers have already shown off some intuitive ways this idea can be used, but the real challenge here is being able to incorporate it in a way that makes the player actually think critically and not just using it as a gimmick. At the very least though, it's a cool idea with a great sense of scale. Planet of Lana doesn't look like it's trying anything all that new, but it's just a really good addition to the side-scrolling genre. It kind of looks like if Playdead understood the idea of light and daytime. Should be a good one. Wizard with a Gun is another one published by Devolver with a rough sketch art style in an isometric world, very Don't Starve. I also don't have much to say about this one. It just seems like a fun mix of dungeon crawling and base building, and I mean, come on, it's called Wizard with a Gun. For that name alone, it deserves to be on this list. West of Dead was a very rough roguelite from a couple of years ago that, for all of its faults, still had some good ideas and an art style that looked like if Mike Mignola's work was brought to life. The stars began aligning for a Hellboy game from this team pretty quickly, given that was Mignola's most famous character, and the West of Dead protagonist was played by Ron Perlman, who played Hellboy in the movies, and lo and behold, we got the announcement of a Hellboy game from this studio, starring Lance Reddick. Wait, what? It's been taken to a 3D over-the-shoulder camera angle as long as that wasn't just a weird trailer direction choice, and I hope a second crack at a roguelite with this art style for Upstream Arcade results in something a bit more polished and less stiff than their last game. Mob Spawn is a game that I stumbled onto on Reddit, which has a fantastic minimalist art style that relies on bold colors and a unique gameplay loop where you suck up items in a room to use as ammo for your gun. And Animal Well is our last Metroidvania on here that boasts a lot of hidden in-game content and may remind people of Environmental Station Alpha. We are not not done yet though. Somehow I have one more section to get to, and that's the dark horses. Most of these are AA, but generally it's just games that could steal the show this year or totally eat dirt. There's a lot of question marks in 2023, but let's start with at least a couple that I'm fairly confident in. Wo Long Fallen Dynasty's demo was a bit unpolished, but stupidly enjoyable. It was so fast-paced that it made Sekiro look like baby's first video game. It's the perfect amount of flashy and fundamentally solid, and managed to draw me in better than the Neo games have. There were still some weird quick animations from enemies which felt a little bit unfair, and the visuals were dated for sure, but the game feel was top-notch right away, and the boss that capped it off wasn't half bad either. Team Ninja continues to stay in the conversation and has a chance to take the next step with Wo Long and, in 2024, Rise of the Ronin. Lies of P, in some respects, might not seem like it's an easy win. This is a very new team, although its publisher is pretty reputable. It's a Souls-like from a small studio, which usually means good but not great projects, and some people find it overly derivative of Bloodborne particularly. And if you remember, there's also this.
You cunning rascal, you won't get through here, die.
But here's the thing, right? First of all, that clip is stand-in dialogue, it's not meant for the final game. Duh, I mean, could you imagine? But also, Round 8 Studios has been very open with this project. They've shown a lot of trailers, given press access to the game, allowed all of that footage to be shared in its truest form, and guess what? It looks incredible, it looks like it runs incredible, and according to the people that played it, it feels incredible. Fextra Life mentioned that it was probably the best pure Souls-like combat outside of From Software themselves. Neo fans, don't freak out, that combat is fairly different, so I don't think it was being considered. And you combine all of that with amazing art direction, creative weapons, and a team that seems to be handling the technical aspects well. I really hope I'm not wrong about this, but Lies of P seems like it's set up for some real success. I cannot wait for it. Like a few other games on here, Remnant 2 has a predecessor that was far from perfect. It wasn't very fluid and sometimes pulled cheap tricks in the name of difficulty, but it had that it factor that you can't always pin down. It rose up from its problems and wound up a pretty damn fun experience. Remnant 2 is another chance to brush up on past mistakes and move swiftly forward. Its initial trailer had some great environments and enemy designs, and at the very least, I'm sure it'll be a nice little co-op title. I can't bring up environment and enemy design without bringing up Atomic Heart, and this is where we get into the games that are just so enigmatic. I don't know how this one's gonna shake out, in all honesty. It looks too good. It's been in development too long. There's gotta be something up with it. That's what I keep telling myself to keep my expectations in check. Maybe the gameplay doesn't feel great, or the story sucks, or it runs like LeBron James on this play. I really don't know what the problem could be because we haven't seen it yet, but if this game can somehow pull through on its promises, I mean, God, it could be really special. It's so creative, so weird, and what we have seen gameplay-wise looks super solid. They've also shown a lot of gameplay and given some reporters time with the game, but it seems a bit more controlled than Lies of P, so the doubts aren't all that settled. If it really is what it says it is, though, it's gonna be a lot of people's favorite game of the year. Sort of in the same boat is Black Myth Wukong. Another unconfirmed date on this one, it could be 2023 or 2024, but as much as it blew our minds initially, there have been a couple of concerning reports on the game's development, and we have seen a few of the cracks in recent footage. What they've shown has still largely been very, very positive, with interesting source material, a super unique set of tools and alt forms, and fantastic enemies and effects, but the concerning things is that it might just be a glorified tech demo. We'll see, these are just rumors at the moment, and they are fairly old at this point, but like Atomic Heart, this could be in Game of the Year contention, or just a massive letdown to so many people. Or it could even just not come out this year, who knows, this one's a mystery. Deck 13 has two projects slated for 2023, Atlas Fallen and The Lords of the Fallen. Will at least one of those get delayed? Almost definitely. We're gonna have to see what the news cycle looks like in the summer. But despite this team being responsible for one of the most infamous Souls-likes to date, the original Dark Souls clone that everyone hated, they've made a lot of progress recently with the Surge games, and I'd like to see The Lords of the Fallen take this genre back to basics a little. I'm even more interested in Atlas Fallen though, because it seems a little bit more unique. It's a super fast-paced action title with a few cool little systems that they've teased, including a momentum meter that forces you to stay aggressive. The setting and the brief snippets of gameplay we saw looked unreal. I usually don't get too worked up about pure survival games, but Nightingale has caught my attention. It was delayed a good few months, but it's from a team that's led by one of the former head honchos of BioWare. It has the classic nature, forest-heavy setting that you find in a lot of survival games, but it's also distinctly Victorian and will be focusing on telling a good story, which I don't usually associate with this style of game. It's a bit different from some of the other things on here, but I definitely have my eye on it. I'm not expecting huge things from Where Winds Meet, Wild Hearts, and Flintlock, but I am expecting them to be entertaining games overall. Wild Hearts is going after Monster Hunter with a faster combat system and a unique on-the-fly building mechanic that seems pretty cool. Where Winds Meet is a bit harder to pin down exactly, it's a bit confusing, but its gameplay has shown some flashes of really great action, although it's never a great sign seeing a game chug like this during its trailer. Hopefully that can get smoothed out. And Flintlock doesn't have that je ne sais quoi, that chemical X that excites me about other games like it, but it still looks to have a sturdy foundation. And number 50 on this list that's way too long, Stellar Blade. Sony's actually been headlining Stellar Blade in a few of their showcases and state of plays, making it seem like a really big deal for them. It features huge, gruesome looking creatures, visceral combat, and massive action sequences, and I don't know if this makes sense, but it kind of feels like the next game in a long-running franchise that's really made its mark on the industry already, except it's a wholly new IP. It just has a very strong presence. Sony has an interesting 2023 coming up with not many first-party games, but a lot of third-party exclusives, and I wonder how Stellar Blade will contribute to their overall output this year. Hopefully I showed off at least a few games that weren't on your radar previously. Again, there are a lot of games coming out in 2023, and I didn't get to everything I'm looking forward to, so feel free to leave some of your most anticipated games down in the comments. If you're new here, subscribe, join the Discord, it's in the description, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.